What is going on, everybody? Welcome. It's December 5th, Monday night. We're here. We're going to talk about one of those big myths that I hear in the golf swing, and that is the hips. We're going to talk about some myths because easily the number one thing people say when, hey, I'm going to get better, I got to work on doing this and that. We're going to get all into it, talk about why it's probably not what you think it is. Let's go. What is going on, everybody? Scott Hogan. We are here. We are going to talk a little bit about the golf swing here. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Before we get started, we're going to go over the hips and all of that. So I've got 3 myths about the hips that we are going to talk about tonight. Hopefully this will help you out. If you're not a subscriber already, make sure you click that subscribe button down below. That will help you notify when everything is going on. Click the little bell too, because YouTube's kind of weird with how that works. And as always, we have our coaching programs, courses. We also have SHG on demand starting. You can check all of that stuff out down below. Okay, so that link is down below if you are interested in checking that out. Okay, so with that, I think it's time we get into the hips. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the hips in the golf swing tonight, all right? And so we're going to go ahead, we're going to hop in on this face-on view first. And myth number 1, when we talk about the hips in the golf swing, okay? Myth number 1 is that, you know, I've got to lead with my hips. I've got to get up to the top of my swing, and I've got to lead with the hips going down, okay? Now, this is where this gets a little tricky. And I think the first thing we have to understand is, where does this all come from, right? Where does this all come from? Well, you got to think about the technology we've had. All right, sorry, we had a little internet power outage there. So we are back though. So what we were talking about there is, you know, when we start saying, hey, the hips and all that stuff, right? You know, we have to know where this is coming from. And so what all this was back in the day, we had what was called, you know, we had video and we have what's called 3D measurement. And so what 3D measurement did was measured what we call kinematics. So kinematics is, hey, I start at 0 degrees of turn in my chest, I go to 90, okay? So something you essentially can see, but with 3D, we could see it a little bit more and a little bit more detail. And so we would do that, and what we would do is we would have our hips, chest, we would have the arm, we'd have our club, and then, you know, some would do the head, some would do like specific knee joints, stuff like that, depending on how detailed you got. But what ends up happening is when you do that, combined with video, we started seeing, oh, when you get up to the top, when I'm coming down, oh, my hips are starting to unwind a little bit. The problem with that is you're looking at what you can see, and you're not actually getting to the point of, why is that happening? Okay? Why is that happening? Well, why is it happening? We call that kinetics. Okay? So kinetics is the forces, torques. I talk a lot about that. You know, really, like, I feel like in like the last 10 years or so, it's really become more popular, but, you know, I know people have done it many, many years before that. It's just becoming more mainstream as we go. And what kinetics can measure is, you know, this is where you would see stuff like force plates. And what we're also seeing is stuff like, there's a operation called Jacobs 3D. That's who I spent a lot of time working with and studying for swings. We did a video with Rick Silva a few months ago. You should check that out on the channel. What that is talking about is, how are we actually moving things to make things happen? And so when we were doing kinetics, what we started to realize is when you do kinetics, you start realizing things are a little different, okay? So what people would always think, and stuff would happen, is they'd go up and they're like, oh, I've got to fire my hips, right? I see it on video, I do that. The problem is that is something that is created by doing something else. So what is really happening as we go? People that get up here and fire their hips to lead the swing, to lead that downswing, they get everything kind of off, the club gets stuck behind them, and they've got some issues that they're going to have a hard time making contact with the ball. What ends up really happening with this is when we get up to the top, the golf club is traveling, and we need to start slowing it down. You know, we're going to go back, our body's turning back, and we need to help it change directions. So what we really need to do to really get our swing started on the way down is we need to use our body. We're going to be on our trail foot. We need to be getting our body to start going the other direction so we can control that club and get the club started back down, okay? So you're going to have that feeling, and then the other feeling I like to have is when you're going is we got to get the club starting down. I'm not pulling it in, I'm not lagging the club. That's another myth we could go over. But you got to get the club started down. Now, what happens when we do that? Well, this golf club, you know, what's this weigh? A couple pounds as we do it, as we hold it. But when we start swinging it and it's got some distance away from us, it's got some speed, it actually starts weighing pretty heavy. It can weigh close to 70, 80, 90, 100 pounds, depending on how fast and how violent you're swinging this thing. So what will happen is, as you do this move and you pull down, watch my hips right here at the front. I'm going to pull down, and they're going to kind of settle, and they do start opening up a little bit. But I'm not doing that, okay? What I'm doing is getting the club down, and I'm really feeling like I'm just pushing and bracing myself on the ground with this left foot. Then you get the byproduct that creates the motion, and that's when we measure things, we look on video, you know, that's the stuff you can see. And so we get caught in that world of what we see, and we got to do what we see, and now we got to go to what we feel that creates the motion. That's where we want to get to. So as we're working on hips, I don't want to see people firing. You got too many problems. I want to get the club back down in front of me, and in fact, if we look at it from a little different view, what we'll see is as I do this, okay, I'm going to shift, pull it down. I got to get that club back in front of me so I can then travel that club out, okay? That is what we want to try to do as we're working with this part of the swing, okay? So it'll look something, what I like to do a lot of is a lot of drills like this. We're going to bring it back. We're going to shift and bring it down. Shift and bring it down. And then we can go through. And what you'll notice is when I do that, when I get the club into that good spot, that I will be able to get everything lined up how we want to. Okay, so that is what we go for as we're going through all this. Okay? So, that is myth number one. You're not leading with your hips. You're leading with a shift, and you're leading with getting the club started. You got to remember the club's traveling the fastest or the farthest on the way down. You got to get that thing started. If you leave it behind, you might run into some issues going forward, okay? Now, myth number two that we're looking at. Your hips supply the power. Okay, so this one's a little tricky because it's not exactly true, and you got to be careful with what you have going on with it. So what happens when you go to swing a golf club, okay, is if I can keep that club wide, right? So if I'm coming back and I can keep it wide on the way down as I'm shifting, okay, what will happen is I will start creating some stretch in my body, okay? You might hear a phrase called X factor stretch. It's where your hips and your shoulders and everything, all that starts stretching out, so you got a bigger gap between your upper and lower body. That can help create some power, right? Or that, in theory, would be able to create some power. It was kind of coined by, I think Jim McLean did it in Golf Digest, where he started talking about X Factor. I'm not sure if that's who invented it, but he's the first one I heard talk about that. And what you end up getting is you get this stretch, which in theory is like, you know, a rubber band that you stretch. And then, you know, the farther it stretches, the more dense it is, right? You can actually shoot that thing farther, get more speed on it. The issue with it is you have to know how to put the power into it, right? You know, my body isn't necessarily going to just, you know, if I do this and leave everything back here, it's not necessarily just going to whip through as fast as we can. There is a point where you will have no ability to catch that club up, and you're actually going to go slower. You're going to go slower. So what I see is a lot of time is people will get up on the tee and they're like, all right, I got to fire my hips, okay? Well, if your hips are moving, the club is going to go slower. Again, what it does is you can create a little bit of potential, but you still got to move the club faster, okay? You moving your hips does not necessarily mean you're going to move the club faster, okay? Now, what are we actually doing to get more power? Okay, so let's go back to myth number 1, where we're leading with our hips, right? What we're actually doing is shifting and pushing and getting this club to come down, right? Well, if I do that faster, my body, like we talked about in the first, is going to brace faster, and then as I go through faster, my hips will go faster, right? But it all is in relation to I've got to get the club moving faster, okay? So when we see people like Bryson, you know, DJ, Brooks, all of those guys, you know, doing work to get more speed, okay? If they're trying to get more speed, what you're going to get is those guys are doing a lot of like pull downs. They take a med ball and they're slamming it. It's all this type of motion, right, to get the thing to speed up. Then their body will react and speed everything else up as they're going through. So that's the real key to making this work, where, hey, I'm going to be able to generate a little bit more power, a little bit more speed as we go. Now, in theory, if you're maybe a slow-hipped person, something like that, you know, I could work on getting it down and then going through faster, but I have to get the club going first. It's not just fire your hips and everything else is going to speed up too. A lot of times we work on getting people to slow down their hips so the club can go faster through, and they're going to be able to hit the ball farther, and they hit it better. So we'll talk about number 3 here as to why that is. So what I like to have people do, you can do this with bands. Get up here, shift, and fire that club as you go. Now, what do the hips do in the swing? They provide stability, okay? They provide stability for like the club face, you know, your club path, things like that. I do like to see them, and I like people to get them to go together through, but got to work on getting it down, and then you can work on getting everything to go through together. It'll make your life a lot easier as you're trying to get the ball to travel, okay? So that is myth number 2 about the hips. And with that, myth number 3, I slice the ball because I don't use my hips. That is not true, okay? Let's talk about why you slice the ball first, okay? So a slice, if I'm a right-handed player, very simple, okay? Let's bring up our numbers here, okay? So if I'm looking at my numbers, I got club path up here on the right. I've got club path, and I've got club face to target and club face to path, okay? So why do you slice the ball? You slice the ball because your club face is open to the target, and it's going to be open to the path, okay? And your club path You know, if you're a right-handed player, okay, is to the left. Okay, you are to the left. So my club path on that swing, 12.5 to the left. My face, you can see it was square to the target, but it's open to the path. Okay, and that creates the slice. Okay, so let's talk about why you slice it. Well, what we've got going on is twofold. One, you're not bringing the club down, which means you can't square it up. Okay, you're not getting it squared up down here. So that face is going to be open to the path. But when you fire your hips, okay, when I fire my hips, notice how my body is opening up. Okay, it's opening up. Where is that club going relative to the target? It is going to go left. We hear a lot of pros working on rotation and stuff like that through the ball. The reason they do that, they are working on fighting a hook. Most pros battle that hook. Good players battle a hook because they've worked on what everybody else should work on already. So we need to get that club coming down, feel that pressure, which controls my hips, and it allows that club to travel more out. Okay? So we'll bring up those numbers as we look at them. Club path there, 0.4 right, so that's a 12-degree difference. That's pretty good. And then that club face still staying very centered. I'm not swinging my absolute hardest on these, but you can see I hit the ball farther than the last one, and obviously straighter. That's always a nice thing to do as well as you're going through these. So we need to get that club down before we go through. Now again, you can go through, you know, as I've come down, I can turn everything through, but it's not until I get to, you know, the club's here and then I go through, right? That can make my life a little easier as far as, you know, how I go through and all that. But firing your hips from the top is not going to fix the slice. You've got to get the club in a position where then we can actually work our way through to go. And everything will work together as we go through. So I like that one a lot. That would be a great swing for me. You can see I'm not actually feeling like I'm trying to hit it very hard at the moment. You know, what I find is a lot of people, when they start working on swinging with less hips and they work on the arms and everything, they get amazed. They're like, man, I'm hitting it straighter, I'm hitting it farther, and it's like a heck of a lot less effort. Yeah, it's amazing what happens when you're not fighting everything. You're not putting the club in weird positions that you got to make up for. So that's what we want. Obviously, that's what I would like. 3.5 right, 1.3 open. For me, that's a pretty solid golf swing. So you can see the distance. Again, I don't feel like I went 100% at that, but, you know, pretty good. So, you know, firing the hips to stop your slice, not going to be, you know, a recommended thing that you're going to want to do. So we're talking hips. We got 3 myths that I see all the time on the lesson tee. One, oh, I've got to lead with my hips. I'm not leading with my hips. Well, you're not leading with your hips. You're leading with your body getting itself started in that direction, which is more of a pressure shift, and you're pulling the club down in a way that, you know, would actually get you started, and then your body starts to react. What I have people do too is get some bands. If you got a really heavy resistance band, or go to the gym, get on the cable machine, and just act like the club's up here at the top and just shift forward and pull it down. Don't pull it in, pull it down, okay? See what happens, okay? See what happens, see how you feel, and that's going to be a lot closer than what you are thinking you're going to have to do throughout that swing. The other thing then is you got to fire your hips for power. No, you got to get the club moving. See a lot of people doing a lot more. When I use Stack System, which by the way, congrats to Victor Hove, Stack System user, won Tigers tournament yesterday, so congrats to him. Congrats to Stack, they're having a huge year. They're a really good product. Obviously, I talk about it a lot. But, you know, when we do that, when I'm doing my stack, my numbers are a lot faster when I don't fire things, when I control my hips and get the club in the right direction moving. And then the last one is, you know, you're not going to stop your slice. You're going to probably make yourself slice more. So don't do that. We don't want that. You're trying to stop it as you go. So again, if you have questions, please comment down below. Also, if you have a swing that you want to get analyzed here on the show live, make sure you send that in, get a free analysis, and we'll talk about it, okay? So we got more coming up. Make sure you click that subscribe button if you're not a subscriber already. We do have our, we are going to have our live round on Sunday. We probably have another round this week. I'm trying to get in play a little bit more. It's good exercise. And we'll have Wednesday, our video. We're going to be talking about practice, take you through a practice session with me. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Been a good night. Hopefully this helps you out. And we'll see you in the next one, all right? We'll see you next week. Talking more about your golf swing, helping you get better, all right? Peace.